You'll never hear an avoidant say, "I love you" first, not because they don't feel it, but because those words feel too dangerous to release. They guard emotions like closely kept secrets, giving you everything except the truth you're desperate to hear. Yet every once in a while, something slips through the cracks. Quiet, unintentional, disguised as a casual phrase. 9 simple words that sound ordinary to everyone else, but to an avoidant man, they're a full-blown confession. And the reason why I say they're a full-blown confession is because avoidant attachment creates such powerful defenses against direct emotional expression that any statement acknowledging need, care, or investment requires them to override years of conditioning that taught them vulnerability equals danger. Making these seemingly casual phrases actually require enormous internal psychological work to release, representing moments when their feelings have become so strong that they temporarily overpower the fear-based defense mechanisms designed to prevent exactly this kind of emotional exposure, which is why these 9 words slip out only when love has grown powerful enough to bypass their guards, despite every instinct screaming to stay protected. This is the truth about avoidant emotional expression that most women never understand. They're not withholding love to hurt you. They're protecting themselves from the vulnerability that expressing love requires. But when love becomes powerful enough, it leaks through in specific phrases that seem casual, but are actually profound admissions for someone whose entire psychology is built on emotional concealment. Most relationship advice tells you to listen to what people say, but with avoidance, you have to understand the weight behind words that seem ordinary. These 9 phrases carry emotional significance that goes completely unnoticed unless you understand avoidant psychology. The painful truth is that many women hear these words, don't recognize their significance, and continue feeling unloved when they're actually receiving the deepest expressions of love an avoidant can currently offer. Hi, I'm Gabriel Hart from My Daily Love, and in this video we'll talk about the 9 words you'll never hear from avoidants unless they're completely in love. Word number 1, I'm sorry. The first word you'll never hear from avoidants unless they're in love is I'm sorry. Apologies cost avoidants pride, and when they appear, it's proof love now matters more than ego. Because saying sorry requires admitting fault, which triggers shame that avoidants typically protect themselves from at all costs. Think of apologies like voluntary vulnerability. Most people can apologize relatively easily when they're wrong. But for avoidants, apologies mean several threatening things: admitting imperfection, making themselves wrong, opening to judgment, showing they care enough about the relationship to humble themselves. When an avoidant says, I'm sorry, genuinely, not dismissively or sarcastically, but actually taking accountability, it means something monumental has shifted. Love has become more important than protecting ego. Your feelings matter more than his pride. The relationship is valuable enough to risk the vulnerability of admission. This is particularly significant because avoidants typically defend against fault through deflection, minimization, or turning things around. I'm sorry represents the opposite. Taking responsibility without defense, acknowledging impact without excuse, prioritizing relationship over self-protection. The genuine apology from an avoidant is a love language. It's saying, you matter enough to me that I'll make myself vulnerable by admitting I was wrong. For someone whose entire psychology is built on avoiding vulnerability, this is profound. From what I've seen, when avoidants start apologizing genuinely, it's one of the clearest signs that attachment has deepened beyond casual to genuine emotional investment, where your feelings matter more than their defensive patterns. Word number 2, I miss you. Here's a phrase that's simple but huge coming from avoidants. I miss you. Avoidants feel absence intensely yet hide it, so saying it means attachment has overridden fear. Because admitting they miss someone requires acknowledging need and dependency, which contradicts their self-sufficient identity. Think of I miss you like admitting you need someone. For most people, it's a simple expression of affection. For avoidants, it's a confession of dependency that threatens their core identity as someone who doesn't need others. Avoidants absolutely experience missing people. They feel the absence, the wanting, the desire for connection. But they typically suppress these feelings or deny them because acknowledging them means acknowledging attachment, need, and emotional dependency, all things their psychology was built to avoid. When an avoidant says, I miss you, they're admitting several things simultaneously. They notice your absence, meaning you matter. They feel negative feelings from your absence, meaning they're attached. They want your presence, meaning they need you. And they're willing to admit all of this, meaning love has overridden defense. This phrase is particularly significant when said during separation rather than waiting until reunion. Saying "I missed you" after you're back together feels safer because the need is already being met. But saying "I miss you" while you're still apart requires admitting current need without immediate fulfillment, which is much more vulnerable. Quality women recognize this phrase for the confession it is. Not just "I want to see you," but "I've become attached enough that your absence creates discomfort I'm willing to admit." Word number 3, "I've been thinking about you." Here's a phrase that sounds casual but is actually massive. I've been thinking about you. Translation: you live in my mind even when I'm alone, and avoidants rarely admit mental preoccupation because this is emotional surrender disguised as casual talk, revealing that you've penetrated their psychological space despite their defenses. Think of mental preoccupation like someone taking up residence in your thoughts. For avoidants who pride themselves on independence and compartmentalization, admitting someone occupies their mental space is admitting loss of control over their internal world. Avoidants work hard to compartmentalize relationships. When you're not physically present, they try to focus on other things, maintain independence, not think about you constantly. This compartmentalization protects them from feeling too attached or dependent. But when attachment deepens, compartmentalization fails. You start appearing in their thoughts when they're doing other things. They think about you before sleep, upon waking, during their day. You've become mentally integrated in ways they can't control. Admitting "I've been thinking about you" reveals this loss of control. He's confessing that you occupy his mind even when you're not together, that he can't fully compartmentalize you anymore, that he's become attached enough that you're part of his internal landscape. This phrase is particularly significant because avoidants usually hide mental preoccupation, worried it reveals too much need or attachment. Admitting it means attachment has become strong enough that hiding it feels less important than expressing it. Now, as you can imagine, for an avoidant man, saying "I've been thinking about you" isn't casual, it's confession. It's the moment his mask slips just long enough to reveal how much space you actually occupy inside him. He's not just reaching out, he's admitting you've crossed the boundary he swore no one would cross, the quiet territory of his private mind. The challenge isn't just recognizing this as significant, it's calibrating your response to honor the vulnerability without making it such a big deal that he retreats, showing appreciation without pressure, acknowledging the meaning without demanding more declarations, because responding with too much enthusiasm or immediately pushing for deeper confession triggers the exact defenses these words temporarily bypassed. Most women either miss the significance entirely and respond casually, "Oh, that's nice," which makes him feel his vulnerability went unnoticed and discourages future sharing, or they overreact with intense emotion. "Oh my God, really? Tell me more. What were you thinking about? This means so much," which makes him immediately regret being vulnerable because it triggered exactly the emotional intensity he fears, confirming that emotional expression leads to overwhelming responses. Understanding how to receive his rare emotional admissions with warm acknowledgement that validates without pressuring, appreciation that encourages without demanding, and presence that honors without overwhelming is crucial because your response to these 9 words determines whether they're the beginning of more openness or the last vulnerable thing you'll hear for months. The difference between women who successfully encourage more emotional sharing from avoidance and those who either miss the moments entirely or shut them down with intensity often comes down to specific response techniques that thread the needle between acknowledgement and pressure. Comment "thinking," and I'll reveal the 3 ways to respond to avoidant emotional admissions that encourages more openness versus the 3 responses that either miss the significance or trigger retreat, and the exact language that honors vulnerability without creating pressure. Word number 4, I don't usually talk about this, but what if the most significant phrase is the preamble, I don't usually talk about this, but that phrase signals the start of vulnerability where he's testing emotional safety, and you passed, because the preamble itself acknowledges he's about to do something unusual, scary, and significant by sharing something normally protected. Think of this phrase like a warning label. What I'm about to share is not typical for me. Handle with care. The words that follow might seem ordinary, but the preamble tells you they're extraordinary for him. When an avoidant says, I don't usually talk about this, several things are happening. He's acknowledging he has emotional walls and defenses. He's choosing to lower those defenses with you specifically. He's giving you information about his vulnerability so you understand its significance, and he's testing whether sharing protected information with you feels safe. The content that follows might be about feelings, past experiences, fears, dreams, insecurities, or anything he typically keeps guarded. But the preamble is the real confession. I trust you enough to show you something I normally hide. This phrase is a massive compliment disguised as casual conversation. He's essentially saying, you've proven yourself safe enough for me to risk vulnerability that I don't risk with others. That's a love declaration for someone whose love language is selective vulnerability. The key is how you respond to what follows. If you overreact, interrogate, or make it a huge deal, you confirm that his instinct to protect was right. If you receive it calmly with warm acceptance, you prove that vulnerability with you is safe, encouraging more future sharing. From what I've seen, this phrase often precedes some of the deepest shares avoidants ever make, and your response determines whether it's the first of many or the last vulnerable thing you hear for months. Word number 5, take your time. The fifth phrase that reveals love is, take your time. It means, I trust you enough not to rush connection, and patience from an avoidant equals nervous system regulation where he feels safe, because giving you permission to move slowly contradicts their typical urge to control pacing through distance. Think of take your time like offering control. Avoidants typically control relationship pacing through withdrawal, creating distance when things move too fast. But saying take your time gives you control of pacing, which requires trust. This phrase might come up in various contexts. When you're making a decision that affects both of you, when you're processing something emotional, when you're working through something that impacts the relationship, when you need space or time for anything. His response of take your time instead of pressure or control is significant. It means several things. He's not trying to rush or control you. He trusts that you won't use time to pull away from him. He's secure enough to give you space for processing, and he values your comfort over his need for certainty. For avoidants who typically need control to feel safe, offering patience demonstrates trust. This patience is particularly meaningful because avoidants usually struggle with others taking time or space, fearing it means abandonment or loss of interest. When an avoidant can say, take your time without anxiety or control, it means he's feeling secure enough in the connection to tolerate uncertainty. The phrase is essentially code for, I trust you, I'm not going anywhere, you can have what you need. That's a profound statement of commitment from someone whose typical response to uncertainty is creating distance. Word number 6, what are you doing tomorrow? What if one of the most significant phrases is about the future? What are you doing tomorrow? Future tense curiosity equals emotional investment, where he's picturing continuity, not escape. Because avoidants typically avoid future planning to maintain escape routes, making future-oriented questions a sign they're imagining you in their future. Think of future tense questions like planting flags in tomorrow. For avoidants who typically keep relationships present tense to maintain flexibility and escape options, any reference to future together is significant. When an avoidant asks about your plans for tomorrow, next week, or any future time frame, he's doing several things. Imagining himself in your future, planning for continuity rather than endings, thinking beyond present moment to ongoing connection, and testing whether future together is possible and desired. This is particularly meaningful because avoidants typically avoid future planning in relationships. They keep things day by day, present-focused, without commitment to future plans or dates. This protects their sense of freedom and keeps escape routes open. But when love deepens, they start naturally thinking in future tense. They want to make plans, know your schedule, imagine time together ahead. What are you doing tomorrow? Isn't just curiosity, it's, I want to see you tomorrow and I'm testing if that's possible. The future orientation indicates that the relationship has moved from I'm enjoying this moment to I'm invested in continuing moments. That shift from present-only to future-inclusive thinking is profound for someone whose attachment style is built on keeping options open. From what I've seen, when avoidants start consistently asking about and making future plans, it's one of the clearest behavioral indicators that commitment is developing, even if they haven't verbalized it explicitly. Word number 7, be safe. The 7th phrase that reveals love is be safe. It sounds casual, but it's protective care leaking through restraint, essentially code for I love you when direct expression feels too vulnerable, because concern for your well-being reveals attachment and care he's not ready to state explicitly. Think of be safe like sneaking care past defenses. Direct I love you or I care about you feel too vulnerable and exposing. But be safe allows expression of care through concern for well-being without having to explicitly state emotional attachment. This phrase typically appears when you're leaving, traveling, driving somewhere, doing something potentially risky, or just going about normal day. The casual "be safe" seems like polite well-wishing, but for avoidance, it's actually expression of genuine concern and care. What he's really saying, you matter to me, and I'm worried about your safety. I want you to be okay. The thought of something happening to you bothers me. I care about your well-being. All of that emotional content is packed into two simple words that feel safe to say. The significance is in the consistency and sincerity. If "be safe" becomes his regular send-off, if it's said with genuine warmth and concern, if it appears even in low-risk situations, it's not casual politeness. It's habitual expression of care disguised as practical concern. This is particularly meaningful because avoidants typically don't express worry or concern, seeing it as revealing too much emotional investment. When they consistently express concern for your safety, they're admitting that your well-being matters enough to override their typical emotional restraint. From what I've seen, "be safe" often becomes a love language for avoidants who can't say "I love you" easily. It's their way of saying, "you matter deeply to me" in words that feel safer than direct emotional declaration. Word number 8. I like being around you. Here's an understated phrase that's actually profound. I like being around you. They don't overcompliment, so this understated admission means comfort, not performance, revealing that you've become someone whose presence feels good rather than obligatory or performative. Think of this phrase like the opposite of social exhaustion. Avoidants typically find social interaction draining, even with people they care about. Being on around others requires energy and emotional labor they'd rather avoid. When an avoidant says, "I like being around you," he's admitting something significant. Your presence doesn't drain him the way most people's does. He enjoys your company rather than just tolerating it. Being with you feels like relief rather than obligation, and he's comfortable enough that your presence requires no performance. This is huge because avoidants typically need significant alone time to recharge from social interaction. If you've become someone whose company doesn't count as draining social time, or worse, whose company actually energizes rather than depletes, that's profound acceptance and comfort. The understated nature is actually the point. Avoidants don't do dramatic declarations or over-the-top compliments. "I like being around you" sounds mild, but for them it's essentially, "you're one of the only people whose presence I genuinely enjoy rather than just tolerate." This phrase often appears during or after extended time together. If you've spent significant time together, and instead of needing immediate space, he says something like, "This was nice, I like being around you," he's revealing that extended proximity didn't trigger his typical need to escape. Quality women recognize this phrase for the profound acceptance it represents. You've become someone whose presence feels like home rather than performance, comfort rather than obligation. Word number 9. You make things easy. The final phrase is perhaps the most significant. You make things easy. The highest praise an avoidant can give, where easy equals emotional safety, essentially their version of "you're home to me," revealing that relationship with you doesn't trigger the difficulty and chaos they've learned to associate with intimacy. Think of easy like the opposite of everything relationships have been for them. Avoidant attachment typically develops because early relationships were hard, emotionally demanding, unpredictable, draining, chaotic, or painful. They learned that relationships equal difficulty. When an avoidant says "you make things easy," they're recognizing something revolutionary. That being with you isn't hard, the way relationships have historically been hard. You don't create the chaos, demands, or emotional complexity they've learned to expect from intimacy. This phrase means several things simultaneously. You don't create unnecessary drama or intensity. Your presence is calming rather than activating. Relationship with you flows naturally, without constant effort or management, and being with you feels simple rather than complicated. For avoidance, this is the highest possible praise. Easy might sound like damning with faint praise, like you're not exciting enough. But for avoidance, easy is everything they've been searching for. Connection without chaos, intimacy without overwhelm, relationship without the exhausting emotional labor they've historically associated with love. This phrase often appears when they're reflecting on the relationship or comparing it to past experiences. "You make things easy," or "this is easy with you," reveals that they've noticed a fundamental difference between being with you and their historical relationship experiences. From what I've seen, when avoidants describe relationships or partners as easy, it's the clearest predictor of long-term commitment. They stay with easy because easy means their nervous system can finally relax rather than constantly defending.